Want to bet? Then get in on the action at Sports Interaction. Whatever your sport, Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pregame, in-game, or on one of our many unique prop bets. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN, or in Ontario, download the app now by using the QR code at the bottom of the screen. 19 and over, please play responsibly. So we mentioned Timo Meyer. We kind of touched on Barbashev and Denis Gurianov moving, all these different trades that Central Registry would have had to have dealt with on Sunday. I did not hear the name Patrick Kane once.
You did not. Although if you were watching the Rangers-Kings game, you would have saw some of the ramifications of what New York is having to do to get Patrick Kane, eventually in the fold. I mean, it's pretty wild day. Jake Leschyshyn clears waivers Sunday. They send him to Hartford, the American Hockey League. They call up Ryan Carpenter and have him sit on the bench in that game, but not take a shift. Braden Schneider also sits on the bench. They basically don't play at all in the game, absent a couple seconds, I think, in total. And that was all done because the league requires a team that is under the salary cap ceiling to play at least 18 skaters in every game. So they technically played or dressed 18 skaters in that game. They just didn't play two. It didn't help that K'Andre Miller got kicked out of the game. And so they were actually down 3 skaters essentially. And, it's pretty wild that they did this, but I mean, essentially there was risk if Carpenter or Schneider had been injured in that game, it could have complicated the cap picture. Instead, they're able to send them back to the HL. They're accruing more cap space. What this means, if you're curious about a Patrick Kane deal, is that the soonest it can happen is Wednesday. I think it's possible the trade goes down Thursday instead. Remember, every day closer to the end of the season, every day closer to the deadline in this case, that the cap ramifications for any move get a little bit simpler, a little bit less money is owed to the players, a little bit less cap hit associated with them. It's my understanding the framework of a deal is worked out here, though. There's already a third-party team, I believe, that's signed up to take on 25% of Patrick Kane's salary contract, and so barring a last-minute change of heart from Kane, who obviously has to waive a no movement clause, or some kind of chaos with the Rangers cap picture where they can't make it work, which doesn't seem likely because they've made these series of moves to put themselves in a position. I do think Patrick Kane will be a member of the Rangers, somewhere before 3 p.m. Eastern time on Friday.
2 questions. First one, is there still like a possibility? Yes, he has the no movement clause, but like, I wonder if there's a world of possibility where Patrick Kane actually straight up says, like, you know what? No, I'm not doing this.
I can't answer that because I haven't spoken to him, right? I mean, like, I guess to take it purely on face value, of course, until something's done, it's not done, right? And so while all these things are happening that point to a trade, while the intel is suggesting that, the teams have got to a point where they're going to make that trade, it's until they conduct the trade call, until all the moves have been made, until the Rangers actually have the cap space, and until Patrick Kane signs off on the no movement clause and waives it, nothing is 100% done. People can have a change of heart. It happens in the world. It's happened in the last week in the NHL where, we all thought that Vladislav Gavrikov was going to be traded to Boston. It's contingent on the Bruins making some other moves to clear up cap space to make that deal with Columbus. Ultimately, Dmitry Orlov becomes available. They pivot in that direction. I'm sure Columbus, that's a tough thing to happen in the front office. I saw that Jarmo Kekalainen was sort of quoted as saying that it, nothing untoward happened, but it's unfortunate how it all unfolded. I mean, this can happen. So yes, I can't say with 100% certainty that it's done until it's done. But at the same time, I also don't believe the Rangers would be going to this extent with their roster. I mean, they've lost a few games in a row heading into that game against Los Angeles, and they're basically intentionally playing down a few players in order to create the cap room needed or to protect the cap space needed to get Kane. I can't believe that they would go to that extent to do things unless they had a very real reason to believe that Patrick Kane was willing to waive his no move clause and come play for them.
And the second question I have is, if this is all this waiting period is essentially being done in the name of accruing cap space, why don't the Rangers wait until Friday where they could max out as much as possible to accommodate Patrick Kane's salary?
Well, that might still yet happen. I think it's because they can do these series of moves and get the cap space by Wednesday. They play a game Wednesday night against Philadelphia. So, maybe there's a world they somehow create the cap space, get the trade done, and get Patrick Kane in the lineup for that game. If not, I would still think Thursday is a reasonable possibility. Keeping in mind that the third party broker team, has to have the cap space available and has to pay real money to Patrick Kane. So, maybe it benefits them to have it come later. So this is fluid. I think, like, for those of us, and I follow this fairly closely, but for those of us not managing the cap every day, like, I don't think people realize that literally your cap position can change based on injuries that happen in the games you're playing every day. All these sort of situations play into it. So, they're managing a situation in real time while trying to create the room for Patrick Kane. And so who knows, maybe it somehow goes till Friday. I'm not putting it out there. I'm just saying it can happen. I know for a fact it can happen sooner than Wednesday. I have some reason to believe it might not happen till Thursday. And look, something might happen between then and now that pushes it to Friday, but the deadline is Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'm pretty confident by that point in time, this will have all been sorted out and Kane will be on his way to Broadway.
Okay, let's look ahead to as much as we can to Friday with some of the pieces still available. We've mentioned Vladislav Gavrikov, Jacob Chikrin is still out there as well. Luke Shen, Brock Besser. In terms of the pieces that are there, in terms of some teams who could be active, what do we have to look forward to for these next few days?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting market now, isn't it? Like, all the high end forwards essentially are off the board. I mean, I'm taking Patrick Kane is still on the board, but it's not like 6 other teams can go try to get him now. And so, when you look at what the trade lists are going to look like, and I have to update my CJ's trade deadline big board. It's in shambles after the weekend because so many of the players that were on there, the last version of it now have been dealt. So I haven't actually done the exercise yet, Julian, but it's going to be a lot of defensemen near the top of that list, and teams looking for a forward like Carolina. I wonder where they go next. I mean, you have James Van Riemsdyk out there. I don't know if he's a perfect stylistic fit for a team that likes to play with as much pace as the Hurricanes do. I wonder about Max Domi. Chicago, I think, had interest in re-signing him and might still have interest in re-signing him. But when you see what some of these players are going for and you're where Chicago is in the standings, I mean, I think anything you can sell off might make sense. They've already scratched Sam Lafferty for trade-related reasons, so we would expect going to be moved. Wouldn't surprise me now to see Domi traded. But it's getting pretty thin in the forward ranks is kind of what I'm getting at. That there's certainly not high-end difference makers out there. You now also got a few teams selling that we wouldn't have guessed. I mean, clearly Nashville is in a seller's position. I wonder if someone takes a jump at Matthias Ekholm, because I think he'd fit in on a lot of teams that are trying to go on a long playoff run this year. The cap ramifications are not insignificant, but it's pretty clear. David Poile, who, by the way, big news out of the weekend, is not going to be the Predators GM after June 30th. He's handing the job then to Barry Trotz, but he's starting to turn over some of the roster and giving Barry Trotz some future draft picks to work with. You got Washington now selling. They've got Lars Eller, Connor Sheary. And so I guess the big action is going to happen on the blue line, I would think. It seems like there's new teams getting involved on Chikrin. Washington, I think, is looking around there. I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina was making some kind of pitch for Chikrin. So I think there might be some renewed action there. Obviously, Los Angeles, we've connected to interest in that player for a long, long time. I wonder if Edmonton gets involved. I mean, I don't know what the Oilers are going to do, but they've on again, off again, at least kept tabs on that player. So there's a chance he goes. We've got Jake McCabe in Chicago. You got Gavrikov, Luke Shen. It sounds like Calgary, actually, Julian, has some interest in Shen. Maybe he ends up coming to your city. But again, I see him as some of the other pieces might have to move first before we get clarity on, who's going to pay the price to Vancouver. The Canucks are interesting here. There's been some renewed speculation, I'll call it, over the weekend that JT Miller, his name being out there. Yeah. It's a big contract. We know that 8-year deal still kicks in next season. But maybe there's a window here where he can be moved. I don't know if they can pull that off. They've already had difficulty, of course, getting someone to take on, a couple of years of Brock Besser's deal. Is there a team out there willing to take that whole JT Miller contract? We'll have to see, but I think Vancouver certainly is in a selling posture and would like to clear out some bigger cap space future commitments so that they can start, their process of building up again. I wonder about Thatcher Demko. To me, that still feels like an off-season move, but his name's out there. It's not really a robust goalie market, but you have expiring players like Jonas Korpisalo, James Reimer, Cam Talbot, who I think are available, but a team maybe looking for a longer term fix might give us a surprise Thatcher Demko deal. So I think there's still the makings of a pretty busy and entertaining week. I mean, for my money, this has been an awesome NHL trading period because you're seeing actual difference making players move. They're all these teams that are like only one Eastern Conference final team can go to the Stanley Cup final. Like, and we've already had 5, as I mentioned, make significant moves. I think Carolina will make moves. Buffalo has all kinds of cap space. Buffalo's hanging around the wild card chase. I don't know that they're going to blow their brains out for a rental player, but maybe they get in and make a bigger move. Like, I think they're kind of a little bit in the shadows. Like, no one's really talking about them, but the Sabres have the ability to add salary for future years to make a big swing. And I think you can argue with a chance to get back in the playoffs after how long that drought has been. Like, that's a pretty tantalizing prospect. Detroit, we never know what Steve Yzerman's up to fully. The latest indication is he's not going to sell any of his UFAs. Players like Tyler Bertuzzi, who certainly had a lot of interest from other teams. Maybe he becomes a buyer. I still think we're going to see some fireworks, man. I can't imagine that we will have just had the last 2 weeks we've had, and then it's all just going to grind to a halt and be, 8th defenseman for 5th round picks from here on out. I think we're going to get some surprises.